Hello, and welcome back to the Cultural Curriculum Chat podcast, the show where we explore culture, leadership, education, and the systems that shape how we thrive. I'm your host, Jebeh Edmunds, educator, author, and equity strategist. If someone that you know who believes that education, leadership, and culture should help people become their best selves, well, you're going to love today's conversation. Our guest today is Lisa Riegel, and Lisa began her career in education with a simple but powerful goal, helping people reach their potential. But over time, she realized something important. Success isn't just about effort or intention, it's also about understanding how the brain drives behavior and how those systems around us shape our ability to grow. Lisa is an educator, researcher, and author who has spent more than 2 decades helping schools, leaders, parents, and organizations align brain science with human systems. She holds dual bachelor degrees in English and secondary education from Kent State University, a master's degree from Otter University, and a PhD in education policy and leadership from the Ohio State University. My mom's an alma mater as well. And she's also the author of several books, including NeuroWell and Aspirations to Operations, which explore how brain science can help individuals and organizations create cultures where people feel connected, capable, and in control of their growth. And Lisa, welcome to the show. We're so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great, me too. So let's get started, Lisa. You started your career in education, focused on helping people reach their full potential. What led you to start exploring brain science as part of that mission?
So I worked quite a bit with the at-risk students and, students who came from really difficult backgrounds, students who were way behind. And I started to recognize patterns and really understanding that behavior serves a purpose. That was kind of where I started was behavior serves a purpose. And so if we feed the need proactively, then we don't have behavior problems. So if somebody has a need for attention, you proactively give them the attention, you feed that need, then it doesn't blow up into a behavior. And so I started there. And then I had kids, and my kids ended up ADHD. So I was like, this is interesting. Like they think very differently than I do. They're having some. So I started diving more into the brain science of ADHD and of stress um and it just kind of snowballed from there. I started and my work at Ohio State was around leadership, but I was really interested in the human system. So even with that work, it was mostly like social science theories, like engagement theories, learning theories. And I started thinking, well, really real change starts in the brain. And we really don't understand how the brain functions. And then we kind of went into this era of education around the science of reading, where we were finally aligning the way that we teach reading to the way that the brain learns to read. That's not new. Like it's learned to read that way the whole way through. So I started thinking, man, this is really a huge knowledge gap for educators and for leaders, not even just in education, but across the board. Like, how do you leverage the human system and make people feel happy and fulfilled and support change and support challenging, productive struggles by understanding better the actual brain?
I love that. And again, with the science of reading and other research that we're starting to learn, it's more than just a PD, 1 hour, 2 hour course that you need to fulfill. And recognizing that in your own children and students that you worked with of, fulfilling the need before it escalates to something, with more behavior, because they do need to maybe stim or walk or be active or, while they're learning the curriculum that you have in front of them. So I love that you've seen that in your own mission and work and diving more into the systems of the brain and the systems that we have, in the classroom. So many of us is like, oh, here's your new crop of students, here's your new roster. good luck. And you're like, okay, I'm learning some of my classroom management skills, but I'm also trying to figure out how this student learns is different from this other student. So how do I scaffold,
Yep.
my education tools for all of my students? And I love that. Can you also kind of dive into a little bit more about explaining what that means, with our classrooms in our organizations of how do we scaffold and get our students all together in exactly what they need to move forward?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I really try to push is that we need to be thinking about brain aligned classroom practices as tier one. This is what we do. This is how we set up routines. It's how we teach and learn. And what happens then is you make a classroom where more people feel a sense of belonging, more people feel intellectually and emotionally safe, and you reduce the problems and you reduce the achievement gaps by setting this kind of culture of I call it a NeuroWell culture for the whole class. So when I work with teachers, I talk about, the first thing being the routines that we have. So setting up routines. Our brain is like a highway with on and off ramps. And to develop a new on and off ramp, it takes a lot of repetition and energy and reinforcement. And so we need to have routines. So when I see like social emotional learning curriculum, somebody pushes in once a week and does a half-hour lesson on some type of emotional skill or social skill, and then they leave, and then nothing happens, and it's not embedded into the routines and the culture of the school, then it doesn't land. I mean, they might be exposed to the idea, but they're not developing that skill because it takes that repetition. So there's lots of different routines that I promote with teachers, and one of them is positivity, having positive routines in your class, having opportunities for kids to tell me two good things that happened today. Tell me one thing you love about yourself. Tell me, just infusing with that positivity. And there's a actual neuroscience reason for that. And that is that we have in our thalamus, which is kind of like the data manager of our brain. That's the part of our brain that creates our perceptions of what's going on in the world around us. And what the thalamus does is it looks out into the environment and it says, okay, here's all the sensory stimulus and data that I'm getting. I'm going to go make associations between what's happening now and what has happened in the past. And so, because if everything we experienced was brand new, our brain would explode. So we look for patterns so that we can figure out how to respond. And that limbic part of our brain's first question is, are we safe? Right. So that thalamus looks in the environment and says, well, this is like that. So you should be stressed or you should be calm or you should feel, loved or whatever it is. We have a lot of students that go to school and it's not a happy place. And so that context is already it's going to escalate, it's going to dysregulate them, right? And when our brain is in a dysregulated state, then the thinking part of our brain kind of shuts down and it goes into, okay, we're going to take care of you because the brain's purpose is to keep us alive. So that limbic system, your data manager and your security guard in your brain are like, okay, CEO of the brain, go grab a snack and we'll take care of this. And when we're safe again, we'll let you back in. And so that's why sometimes we end up, having an explosion. And then afterwards, we're like, why did I even say that? Like, I don't even believe that. Why would I have even done that? Right. And it's because you didn't. It's the limbic part of your brain that was doing whatever it could to keep you safe. And so some of it is understanding the brain science and helping kids understand their brains. Um, because I see a lot of kids getting punished for their biology. They are having stress related issues in the classroom. They escalate, they act out. It's their data manager and their security monitor that are dictating the behavior. And then when we talk to them about the behavior, we say things like, well, why did you choose to do that? They didn't. They were out having lunch somewhere. So teaching kids, they still have to be held to account for consequence for what they did, but helping them to learn self-awareness, self-regulation, and ultimately self-control. And you can't have self-control if you don't have awareness and regulation. So setting up some of those kinds of routines in the classroom, setting up some teaching strategies that help kids to understand where they are. So like one that's super simple, on the way in the door, do fizzy or flat. So I take a can of pop, shake it up. open it up, it explodes. And I tell kids, pop tastes disgusting if it's too fizzy or if it's too flat. And in the same way, you're carbonated, but I can't see inside you. So when you walk in the classroom, if you're feeling kind of flat or you're feeling sort of fizzy and agitated, just say fizzy or flat. And what I'm going to do is give you some grace and space to regulate, to calm your body down, and then when you're ready to join us, you can join us, as opposed to me not doing that, not giving them agency or a voice to have a bad day. And then I start with where's your homework? Why don't you have your pencil? What do you do? And then it explodes from there. So
Mm.
sometimes even just having somebody to recognize, like, I'm not okay in the moment, and just having a teacher that gives you an empathetic pat on the back. Okay, I'm sorry you're not feeling good. Go, let me know if I can help. And in the meantime, giving that grace and space, just that can have such a huge impact on a kid's relationship building with the teacher and sense of agency.
Yes, I love that. And even how you said too, Lisa, is the fizzy or flat. I love that because you already embedded the language so that student can just say one or the other and they can you have that language with that student to say, okay, I'm going to give them that grace and space. Maybe you have a calming corner. Maybe you do some stretches or yoga movements to help them recenter. There's all kinds of ways, like you said. And if you're feeling flat, yeah, some of us have flat days too. And we're just like,
Right.
I'm here. I showed up, and when I feel comfortable and ready to share, I will, but just to kind of show you where I am walking into your classroom community. That is
Yeah.
really important. Oh,
Well, and
I
if you're having
love
a
that.
flat if you've got a bunch of students that come in and say flat for a day, or if you're feeling flat, you could be like, "You know what? I'm feeling kind of flat. And do you know what makes flat beverages carbonated? Is positivity." So I'm having a moment. So if you guys would help me out, we're going to do just a little bit of positivity popcorn. And I want everybody to just bounce around. You say something and point to the person over there. And our topic is, tell me one thing that's really cool about you that other people don't know. Go.
Oh, I
And they
love
just
that.
pop, pop,
Yeah.
pop, pop, pop. And then before you know it, you're smiling, the kids are smiling. And thank you so much, because I was really feeling flat and now I'm feeling ready to roll. And you're
Love
modeling
that.
for them that this is how you do things. And it doesn't take any time at all. It's just
Oh,
a minute, 2 minutes. And the other
yeah.
thing that I talk a lot about is the intellectual safety piece, because there's a lot of kids that are not intellectually safe. They come in, they can't, we know that they're behind, but we're not really addressing it in a way that helps them. So one thing that I talk about with intellectual safety is to break your class into learning sprints. This is the easiest thing you can do, and I'm telling you what, I promise you, it has had the biggest impact. So I had one teacher that did this who was in kind of a computer class where the kids are on the computer. She broke into these learning sprints and did what I'm about to explain. Their productivity increased by 30% in 2.5 weeks. So it worked.
Wow.
So what
Yeah.
it is that if you think about when you go to the gym and you're like, okay, I'm going to run on a treadmill for a half hour, and you get on and you're running and you're like, man, I got to be close. And you look down and it's been like 7 minutes and you're like, oh my God, I have 23 minutes. I'm never going to make it. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what school is all day long for kids. It's an 8-hour treadmill ride. So if we break it up, and if we're on the treadmill and say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to run at this speed and then I'm going to evaluate. And then maybe I'm going to walk for a couple seconds and then I'm going to run again. You'll make it to the 30 minutes, right? So all you have to do for a learning sprint is put a 10-minute timer on your board or on a whiteboard, or you can use a Google timer or whatever. And you introduce the sprint. You say, okay, we're going to do a 10-minute learning sprint. Here are the expectations during this sprint. I'm going to talk a little, you're going to this, you have to be quiet, or you can talk quietly with friends, whatever the expectation is. Then you say go and you hit the timer, and the kids focus for that 10 minutes. When the 10 minutes is over, no matter where you are, even if you're in the middle of explaining something, you go, oh, time's up. Okay, let's take a rain break. 2 minutes. You guys can get up, you can stretch, you can walk around, you can talk to your neighbor, you can whatever. Sometimes you can have a 5 minute, sometimes you can have a 1 minute. You just kind of break it up. And then you say, okay, now it's time to go back to the learning sprint. So when a student comes into the class, you can say, okay, today we're going to do 3 learning sprints. We've got a 10-minute one, a 12-minute one, and a 15-minute one. We're going to do these breaks. And then you've got a list on the board. The kids can see you checking it off, and they start to
Yes.
learn to check off their tasks as they go. They learn how long is 10 minutes. What can I accomplish if I actually focus for 10 minutes? And and the first thing teachers always say is, I don't have time to get through what I'm doing. I don't have time for breaks. But here's my challenge question. How much of that 20 minutes or 30 minutes of teaching are they listening? So you're
That part.
talking, but they're not listening. And if you're talking and they're not listening, you're not teaching, you're just talking. The
Mm.
learning difference, and I've had teachers kindergarten all the way through high school. I've even used this in a correctional facility with students. Um, all the way through, what I hear is like, even the kindergarten teacher was like, it only took like 3 days. And then the kids were like, I'd say there's a learning sprint. And they're like, they'd snap to attention, like, okay, we're ready. And they would all focus. And she said, it's insane. It's incredible. And they learn how to focus on something, transition their focus, focus back. And those are life skills that are really, really important. And so
Yeah.
that's the idea of aligning your class to a NeuroWell culture. And so it's not one more thing to do. It's just a pair of glasses that you look at your operations, your routines, the way you teach and learn, and you go, this works really well because it's aligned with how our brains need it to work. This isn't working. No wonder it's not working. And even like
Yes.
teachers will talk about wiggle time, and they'll say, oh, I do wiggle time. But a lot of you are doing it reactively. Oh, these kids are crazy. We've got to do a wiggle time to get them calmed down. But if you're building it in as part of the learning sprints, then that need is anticipated and taken care of. So it's healthier and happier for everybody. You're not waiting for the hole in the boat before you plug it, right?
Plug it in going, "Oh, no, we're sinking." You're
Yeah.
so right, Lisa.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed too with some folks with their wiggle breaks, it is reactive or it's the last thing before recess or the last thing you do before transition to another class period. But you're right. If you have them in chunks, you can have 3 sprints, within a learning, focused learning time for them to get up and move. Because you're right, it is a life skill that even as adults, we drone on. We have the glossy eyes after
Yep.
45 minutes listening to a lecture straight. So think about the young ones that just are wiggling in their seat or, have to use the bathroom or all this stuff.
Right.
They can't focus. Yes. So why do people struggle in these broken systems? You've had some great examples, how long it is, the expectations, even the transition time. Oh, I don't have time. Well, you can carve out 3 days. That's a good transitional period to kind of get the verbiage and the language up. What do leaders still need to understand about that when they're still struggling with these little tweaks?
So I think that the first issue that we run into is that the way that schools lead transformation is like they'll have me come in and do PD. And I'll come in and I'll do a day. Maybe I do a full day and we go real deep and we come up with all these ideas. Sometimes the leaders are there, sometimes they're not even there. And so, how can you lead change if you don't even know what the change is?
Yep,
And
Lisa.
so I have a second book that's for leaders called Aspirations to Operations. And I see a lot of leaders have aspirational and inspirational vision for what they want to see, but they don't have an operational view of what it looks like or how to get there. And so they wear their people out. And it's just one initiative after another. And then they're like, well, we trained them, so I don't know why they're not doing it. And I'm like, well, what is it? What does it look like? What does it sound like? So, like, I was working with a school because I'll work with probably 4 or 5 schools that really want to do transformative work, and I'll go deep. I'm there all the time. I'm there to support the leaders, the teachers, everybody. And like the one school I'm working with, we built in the NeuroWell framework as one of their priorities. And everything we do goes back to that. And so like then we had the principals, like the learning sprints. So the principals in kindergarten through 8th grade said, we want learning sprints happening in every class, right? Doesn't have to be every second of the day, but through especially the core classes that aren't as you know, collaborative and have movement or projects or things. So that became a clear directive from the principal. Then the principal is going around and observing it and reinforcing it and celebrating it. And teachers during teacher-based team times are talking about how they're doing it and what they're learning. And they're being given the chance to explore and experiment without, you know, repercussions if it doesn't go well. Like we're celebrating the growth. But then the key too is that leaders have to measure adult behavior and not just outcomes. Because if you're only measuring student test scores, and I think that's the worst thing that ever happened in education, is when we started
Amen.
linking student test scores to teacher quality. It
Yes.
it moved the system from I teach kids to I teach content. And now if I have a kid who's not just plugging along at the right pace, they're not a puzzle to be solved. They're a problem to be managed, right? Because
Mhm.
data. So when you
Yep.
school leaders that say they want all these wonderful student engaging things, but all they measure is that test. And that's all they want to look at. And they don't have clarity around what can we do? What's our theory of change that's going to make those outcomes better, right? What are the adult behaviors? Like a learning sprint. If we're not measuring that, if we're not watching for that, if we're not celebrating that, then all of those different kinds of improvements and initiatives, they spark and then they tucker out.
Yes, and it does. You get into like a full day PD with you, you're all energized, you got the book, and you're just like, okay, but you're right. You need to have both in tandem. You need to have your administrator also being in those rooms with you, learning the verbiage. And I love how you said we're not punishing or giving you repercussion, we're celebrating the growth because it takes time. You can get so motivated, but all of a sudden it peters out because, well, you know, the leader in my building decided they're gonna do another initiative, or we're just focusing on this for April, or,
Right.
and it just, it starts and stops. And then the students are also seeing, well, the adults aren't following through. What
Yes.
makes it feel like I should do this exercise or this new concept? So I really, really love that. So yes, your book, NeuroWell, what inspired you to write this book, besides the children and the kids that you worked with? Yes.
So I actually was inspired to write it by one of the schools I work with because the principal kept saying to me, "Why don't you have this in a book?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know," because I'd been doing my theory of change, which was this neuro well, like here's routines, here's the way we can truly differentiate, and it's all aligned to that neuroscience. Here's how we deal with discipline problems. Here's how we make behavior plans. So I had all these little chunks of things, and so finally I was like, well, maybe I should actually write this down. So I did, and that's
I
where that
love
came
that.
from. And then
Oh,
the aspirations to operations, which is the
mhm.
leadership book, is the same thing. It's the framework that has emerged over almost 20 years of my work in coaching leaders and tools that I've created and things we've tried. And so everything in both books is not theory. It's actual stuff people have done that has worked.
Oh, and I love a good best practice,
Yep.
especially as a teacher. The teacher is like, give me the goods. How can I apply it like tomorrow in my class and still keep it moving? I just love that, Lisa. Now, we've been talking really well about, uh, educators and our administrators. How about parenting? You work also connects with families and parenting. How can parents use brain science to better support their children?
So, one thing I would say is understand the brain science, right? So, we have these departments in our brain. So, I actually name them. So, the data center, that thalamus that's deciding how we perceive things, I call him Harold, and I call my security monitor Bob.
Oh,
And
I love
so,
it.
if you teach your kids that, that's how your memory, and like even the idea that our memories don't like the memories that Harold's looking at to make associations don't tell a story and can't tell time. He is just looking for when conditions were similar, your body was calm or your body was stressed or we were in danger, right? So it's not logical. And so teaching kids that, and then, if you name the brain, so then I could be like, you know what? Tell me what Harold's telling you right now, because you seem like you're really agitated. And I'm wondering if my Harold's telling me the same thing yours is, because it seems like it's not. Now, all of a sudden, instead of what's wrong with you, that's a different message. Or I can go and say, hey, Bob seems really agitated today. Can I help? Can I help you like tell Bob that we're good, we're okay? Or is there something going on that I can help you with? That conversation aligns me as an ally instead of an adversary. And so I think as a parent, if you're able to kind of take that step back, explain that brain, it reduces some of the shame and guilt that kids feel when they're not doing well, right? And so understanding, so all behavior is biology and context. It's that intersection, right? So understanding the biology helps us to create some empathy. And as a parent as well, if your kid's out of control or having a really rough time or not succeeding at school or being involved in risky things, you're stressed out. And so you escalate the situation where if your kid, comes home and's yelling at you and freaking out and mad about the world, if you can recognize and look at them like their herald is currently completely dysregulating my child and is sending the child I love and know out to lunch, right? So right now, I'm not even speaking to my child. I'm speaking to the unconscious part of his brain. So just even understanding that, now all of a sudden, I'm going to look at my kid as a project. How do I calm you down so I can talk to you? Because I don't want to talk to Harold. And it's not, I don't escalate. Why would you say that? What are you saying? And just up you go. And so I think that understanding that biology is huge. The second piece is context. How do we create a safe home that's about positivity? And there's some things that I talk about with parents. One is, some of the stuff's like simple and like at dinner, tell me two good things that happened today. And I guarantee you, your kids won't be able to do it. And it's really sad when you're like, wow, they're not noticing all these beautiful things. And do you remember there was that study that was done with, you had to count, there were teams playing basketball and you had to count how many baskets the team got. And then the researcher would say how many and you'd say it. And then they'd say, did you see the giant gorilla walk across the basketball court? And most people don't see the gorilla because their brain is
Oh,
primed to be watching the baskets and the teams, right?
well, yeah.
We have so many beautiful gorillas and kind gorillas and generous gorillas walking around in our lives, but we don't even notice them. And so, as a parent, if you can train your child's brain to be primed to look for beauty, primed to look for joy, then their little herald will confirm that. Will look for those things in the environment. But if we're primed to believe that the world's dangerous and people are unkind, and there's a lot of context in our world between media and social media and all kinds of things that kids experience that pre-prime them with
Mhm.
negative information for Harold to look at. So, having like some morning routines. What are you looking forward to today? Just priming the brain that way. Or, what's one thing that you can do to be super, to pay a compliment to somebody today? Or, okay, we used to give our kids challenges. We'd be like, okay, we challenge you to, integrate this one word into conversation today. Or we challenge you to try to pay a compliment to your teacher when you notice that she looks stressed. And then they'd come home and they'd have to report on it. And it became like a game and it was fun, but it was like forcing them to see the world a little bit more optimistically. So I think there's a lot of little things you can do just to make the climate of your home one that's very safe and very calm and calming. Um, the other thing for parents that we learn a lot through family dinners and conversations with our parents, and we just don't do that anymore. Like, even if you go out and see people on a date, they're not even talking to each other. But what's happened for our kids, because we don't have long periods of time of boredom, right? In the car, they have games now on a road trip. At family dinners, they're looking at their phone. So forcing your kids to have a conversation, to sit and listen and to talk because they learn the rhythm of conversation. They learn nonverbal signatures. They learn all of those kinds of things that can help them not be afraid of social engagement because anxiety is the product of not knowing. So if I don't know how to do this,
Mm.
know how to engage, I don't know how to ask a question, then I'm going to be anxious about being involved in that. So those are the kinds of things that I think you can do at home that can be really helpful.
I love that. Oh, and it's like you said, simple, just
Oh,
connecting with your child. And another thing I really loved what you said was giving them little games and challenges like, okay, pay somebody a compliment, say this one word into
yeah,
into your conversation. That kind of challenges them to say, okay, when am I going to interact this word? When am I going to share a
yeah,
compliment? And then I can't wait to report back home to mom that,
yeah,
"Hey, I did it." And like you said, to find those beautiful, gorillas out there that are, to find those glimmers of hope. That is so, so important and profound. I mean, and uh, I could talk to you all day, especially about brain science. I'm just fascinated by you naming them Harold and Bob. And just some of them like how is Harold? Like Harold feels unsafe.
Right.
Harold wants to run instead of going, "What's wrong with you?" So many of us, would say that first knee jerk response, "What's wrong? What happened?" And then the child just, crumples, and it's like, "Oh, something is wrong with me if I have this
Yeah.
feeling." But just to talk about that behavior versus them as the individual. Oh, Lisa, this is just amazing. So before we go, because I want all of my listeners to get your books and, especially educators, they are the leaders of their classroom as well. What do you believe leaders must understand about human development in the systems?
I think that understanding that our brains are actually wired for inertia. We are not wired for change because change is scary. And what I see a lot of systems that are focused on the structure, the org theory, the policy. And policies shape change, but people make change. And so
Sure.
we need an entire system, especially in education, which is such a people driven system. We need a human focused system. And so leaders, I think, understanding themselves, self awareness, self regulation, self control, same for teachers. If they can't know themselves and control their Harold and Bob and be more informed, then they struggle to model that with kids. But once they understand that, it becomes so natural. Like these things are not difficult. They just become sort of the way that you position yourself in your life. And what's amazing is watching as you start to make this transition, people are happier, they're healthier, they're more successful. And leaders need to create that climate in the school, and I see schools spend thousands of dollars on posters, but climate is action, right?
It
So
is.
it's
So
what we
is.
do,
Yeah.
not what we say. So you
Yes.
mentioned it earlier, I don't see the adults doing this, why would I do it, right? So
Yeah.
it starts at the leader level, and it is not a teacher's responsibility to create the culture of the school. That's the leader's responsibility. And then it's the teacher's responsibility to be a good shepherd of that culture and to continue to bring that into their classroom and to, do their part. But that's what I think, the books are really designed to help them understand the why, but also to give them the what. So, what do
Yes.
we do about it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm such a huge admirer of your work. From one educator to another, just having like I said, the language, the skills, the scaffolding, all the things that our teachers and leaders can use. And like you said, it starts from the top all the way around for culture. You have to be active, and moving forward. So, Lisa, where can my viewers and listeners get all things Lisa Riegel, get your books, and how can they follow you along this brain science journey?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and I encourage people to link up with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I have a website called lisaregal.com. I also have my website, Education Partnerships. It's epinstitute.net, and I can give you those to put in the show notes. But
Yes.
that one has links to lots of different web programs and podcasts that I've been on. So if people are interested in what we're talking about, there's lots more that they can hear. Um, and then my books are available on Amazon. And I do individual life coaching. So I'm not a therapist, but I can help people think about how the brain science can help them individually. I work with schools, I can work with teachers, I can do keynotes, I can do workshops, I can do leadership boot camps to really help schools start to understand and gain the knowledge. And then, like I mentioned before, some schools that are like, okay, we're really ready for some transformative change. I can go deep and really help them usher in, all the supports that we need to move the system itself.
I love that. And again, having an expert who has been in the classroom, that's
Yeah.
just something that is so important. Another ally who's been there and understands students and how to communicate with them. Those are the best experts that we could have, and experts like you in this field. So, thank you, Lisa, so much for being a guest on the show today. And listeners, if you could do me a favor and share this episode with an educator, a parent, a school leader who wants to learn more about brain science and how those systems that we have around us can work in our best interest for all of our students to reach their full potential, this episode is for you. So thanks again, Lisa, and I will see you all here, same time, same place next week.
Navi.